you who are the students of the Ascended Masters of long standing are very familiar with the chronology of the civilizations of this planet and of the story of individual life streams who have incarnated upon this world. In particular, you have the grasp of the understanding of how originally, when the Godhead charioteers of the Mighty I Am presence first came forth and sent forth their blessed heart flames into these denser realms of earth and air and fire, water, and so forth, that initially all was an Edenic paradise, a garden, if you will, of abundance, of eternal youth and health and happiness, and that quality known as divine perfection. You understand as well that all of those life waves at that time wielded the power of the presence virtually without limit. And all was going according to the divine plan, while certain of the earliest root races passed through all of the initiatory cycles, returning victoriously in the ascension without ever dipping below the level of purity and harmony and perfection. It was only in latter ages then when the so-called fall from grace and expulsion from the Garden of Eden took place. For your purposes today, the important thing to realize is that initially, by way of co-measurement and comparison, your tube of light and your crystal cord were of equal magnitude. And it was because there was this veritable river of God life, God activity and energy, and God power flowing forth along the crystal cord, that the miracles of God were worked by all of the evolutions of that time. After the fall of mankind, there was the wholesale misuse of that life of the crystal cord. And it was actually the mercy of the law when the decree went forth from the lords of karma that there should be a restriction of the quantity, if you will, of crystal cord energy metered out moment by moment to the embodied life stream. This was so that there would not be the profligate and wholesale misqualification of that life on such a vast scale, whereby unquantifiable magnitudes of negative karma were created almost constantly, only to have to be experienced in the return current and balanced, if possible. So this constriction of the crystal cord has taken place because of the absolute imperative necessity that the power be pinched off so that there would not be that wholesale misqualification in an ongoing manner. How does this apply to the Shield of Elohim? It applies because this shield and buckler of the presence is intended to give the students of the light and all mankind the momentum that they desperately need in order to comply with the laws of life as it relates to the use of energy. In other words, for the power of the presence to flow through you in orders of magnitudes greater than at present, you must first demonstrate to the satisfaction of your own Holy Christ presence and your Ascended Master sponsors, and yes, the Lords of Karma, you must demonstrate that when that increased power of whatever sort it might be, but most especially the increased power of an increased flow of the crystal cord magnitude, that when that comes about, it will be a blessing and not a curse to your life stream. That power is decidedly necessary, that increased power. But before it can safely be vested into your world, there must be the relearning of certain laws of life and principles, so that it is, in fact, a blessing and not a bane to your life stream or to other parts of life. For the sake of simplicity, let us agree that all of that can be reduced to one golden precept, which is that your life is to be fed into God patterns of God perfection in all ways. Now that seems simple to say. Again, it is one of those oft-repeated phrases that, if you are not careful, will become a platitude to you. You will dismiss it as something that you have heard 1,000 times before. But until you have mastered what is meant by God perfection, you will not earn the opportunity and the privilege of directing greater magnitudes of divine life. So this principle is behind some of the imperatives which the Ascended Masters have set before you as part of the golden precepts. And in a sense, either you have dismissed these concepts as being unrealistic, as being fairy tales, or else you have said to yourself, that's too hard for me. And in any case, you have quickly allowed it to go into forgetfulness, to where you have not remembered these things. Or you have perhaps not grasped how you were to achieve the injunction, the direction of the Ascended Master on this subject. I'd like to cite for you a couple two examples of these categorical, uncompromising propositions set forth by beloved Saint Germain and one of his ascended students on this subject. And it relates quite directly to our thought form, the engram of the Shield of Elohim, as you will soon come to see yourself. But first, what are these injunctions that are so challenging to mortal consciousness? He states, "Beloved students, my heart rejoices in the nearness with which some of you are feeling the conviction of the majestic presence I am, which you are. Therefore, do your utmost to feel calmly and serenely. And if you cannot see it otherwise, shut your eyes and then see perfection everywhere. Then more and more there will come to you the proof of this marvelous presence, to where you will begin to see and feel and hear and experience the marvel of all marvels, which as children you lived in as miracles performed. So if you cannot do it otherwise or accomplish it otherwise, shut your eyes and see perfection." One of Saint Germain's disciples, writing and speaking on the same subject, put it this way: "No matter what the appearances seem to be in the outer world, do not allow those appearances to find an anchorage within your own consciousness, whether they be within your own personal life, or as it relates to suggestions from others concerning America as the heart of freedom to the world, or your own nations. Do not allow those appearances to find anchorage in your consciousness. The most valuable thing which a student in a student's life, when they are confronted with things which they themselves have no control over, is to shut their eyes to the outer appearance and acknowledge and set forth into action the mighty power of the I Am presence. Do you not understand how very foolish it is to keep accepting the appearances through suggestion or otherwise of those things which you do not want, whether they be occurring on the national stage, within your state, or whether they be personal, when at all times you have the extraordinary privilege of setting into activity the mighty I Am presence to correct whatever has the appearance of less than perfection. The habit of the whole human race is to envision imperfection, where we, the ascended masters, behold divine perfection. In the recognition of your mighty I Am presence, you may fully accept the perfection of that presence every hour of the day. Instead of fixating on lamentations of all sorts of destructive activities, you are to know the I Am presence consumes them and requalifies all this outer surging unreality with God freedom, divine protection, and divine perfection. Therefore, see that perfection, the full perfection of everywhere in your life and world. Do not be affected or disturbed then by the creation of others where you cannot help, except to hold to perfection. Always knowing that back of the seeming shadow of the outer appearance stands the blazing white light of the mighty I Am presence. Now, this is the discipline of the ascended masters. There are so very many mysteries and principles of cosmic law at work here, but it is important for you, as you wish to draw forth more power from the presence of God, that you embrace these disciplines as being real for you. They are so very important if you are to disengage and untangle yourself karmically from the world's karmic juggernaut that is going wherever it is going. So we'll talk about that in terms of the individual, your individual karma, and then also in terms of the world at large. Let's start with the world at large. Let's say hypothetically, for the sake of argument, that any one of you it suddenly comes into great wealth. Let's say you are suddenly worth $100 billion. Let's also say that you wake up one morning and find yourself the absolute sovereign of a nation or an empire. Individually, you have the power of legislation and life and death and so forth. You are presumably the sovereign over an entire empire of millions, hundreds of millions of people. With all of that presumed power and ability, do you realize that you could not force even one other person to either be happy or to embrace the path that you have embraced for yourself? Not even one person, much less 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. There are laws of free will when it relates to heart flames that are absolutely inviolate in one great sense. And as heartrending as many situations are, there are laws that are absolutely universal and impersonal, which no one can change, no matter what their family relationship might be or what presumed power they might be. You can't go out with a club like those cartoons that they have of the caveman and bash someone over the head and say, "You will be happy. You will come into the golden age whether you want to or not." If you were so foolish as to think you could do that, you would find that far from raising that other person into that perfection which they aren't cooperating in of their own free will, or other group that hasn't discovered perfection for themselves or their presence for themselves, far from the power that you use, the money that you spend, etc., far from that making things better for them, not only would it not elevate them into the perfection which you want, but it would karmically tie you to their lost opportunity and misuse of the light that you lent them, and you would find yourself inexorably being drawn into the very conditions that you sought to shield them from. At inner levels, there is a drama that takes place, which you have, the Brotherhood has alluded to from time to time. There is a form of dialectic, if you will, of thesis and antithesis, divinely ordained, between the ascended masters and the lords of karma, which occurs many, many times when the ascended masters wish to use their causal body momentums to intercede on behalf of unascended mankind. And they recognize that whenever it comes to dealing with unascended mankind, there are greater cosmic equations at work, and it is the office of the lords of karma to weigh all considerations, including the consequences to that ascended master should the light that they yield or they put up as collateral for the dispensation, should that be lost due to the misuse by unascended mankind. So the lords of karma are there to protect that station of the ascended masters and safeguard their light and be a check and balance to that natural compassion which even they have. Many's the time when there have been cosmic beings who have delivered their addresses, and they have prefaced what they're about to say by saying, I am about to utter a fiat, which is going to reverberate throughout the cosmos and bless mankind. And this fiat, which I'm about to utter, has already been approved by the lords of karma. So even though they've got that power, there is a hierarchy of not only the lords of karma, but of cosmic councils that goes all the way back to the very heart of Alpha and Omega. And when things are done, they are done in a way that affords opportunity to unascended mankind, but it is also a safeguarding of all of those ascended ones. If that be true for them, of course, it is even more so true for you. If any one of the ascended masters, whether it was Jesus or the Buddha, or even Mori and Kuthumi as unascended Mahatmas, if any of them could superimpose, compel perfection upon mankind with or without their conscious cooperation, it would have already long ago been done. Millions of years ago it would have been done. The reasons why it can't have to do with the mysteries of the law of octaves of free will, have to do with the principles of love, wisdom, and power that govern all of the forces of creation that are absolutely impersonal and universal in nature, and have to do, of course, with the destiny of the sons and daughters of God to become themselves ascended masters, and of having to unfold that perfection of each one's own I am presence for themselves. So one of the dimensions of this discipline of seeing perfection everywhere is that in doing it that way for all of the world, doing it through your mighty I am presence, you are doing the very most that is possible lawfully for you to do collectively. In that sense, you are like the sun that shines or the rain that falls upon the just and the unjust. It is a universal outpouring that is the glad free gift of your heart and your attainment to see perfection everywhere, holding it forth there, doing it through your Mighty I Am presence, and then turning it over to the I Am presence of the other life stream or life streams, and to the wisdom, the greater wisdom of the Brotherhood of Light, that they may do the very most that they and their wisdom are able to do. I might add in this regard that when the Brotherhood, the Lords of Karma, do obtain a dispensation to reach through the veil and address mankind in their own first-person identities, as in this Vanguard Ascended Master activity, it requires handstands, it requires a great collective resolution on the part of the Brotherhood to once again take that initiative. It is no small matter. And for those egalitarian ones who would like to believe that the masters are dictating on every soapbox and every crossroads of the world from thousands and tens of thousands of voices, it belies the solemnity and the magnitude that is required to bring forth such a dispensation. So when Saint Germain and others advocate that you see perfection everywhere, it is not in the sense of the proverbial Pollyanna attitude, which seems to want to paint a pretty face on something that is not desirable. It is not a case of merely denial, because you're not simply, although you are part of the picture, is saying to the appearance of unreality, you have no power. But that is always followed up by affirmatively seeing the perfection of the presence come into the fore, come to the fore, and swallow up all that is less than God perfection. And that is lawful for you to do. Furthermore, in addition, as you train your own elemental vehicles, the emotions in your feeling body, the elemental essences of your mind that is constantly formulating thought and visualizations, as you regiment those to only feed into patterns of perfection, you are actually, at long last, returning back to the Edenic state when there was only such divine perfection. There is a trend which has probably been around for quite a long time, but it is something that gets voiced on a regular basis in the modern culture. It is the idea that perfection is boring. Twin sister to that idea is the idea that perfection is not worthy because it isn't really original. It's been done over and over before. And unless your creation, whether it's sculpture or painting or music or something, unless you are venturing out into uncharted territory and doing something that hasn't ever been done before, it's even if it's an imitation of the perfection of God, that is not original and hence unworthy. To the mortal consciousness, the perfection of God does not flow, and there is not a charge within that provides feedback or reinforcement. It is incumbent upon every student of the light to cleanse their palate of appetites for imperfection of all varieties. Because as long as they are there, they will be like an anchor that will pull you down and pull you back, snapping you back into the grip of the things of this world of unreality. All the while, side by side with those outer appearances of imperfection, there are limitless, vast realms of divine perfection. And so, if need be, you will have to fast yourself of some of those things, wean yourself of them as a part of the process of cultivating the joy of perfection. One thing you may be assured of is that perfection is something that you will never be sated with. You'll never be, it is not boring. It is not ever something where you feel like, okay, I have reached the pinnacle of possibilities and achievements. I've done everything that there is to be done, and now there's nowhere to go but down. Perfection is a self-reinforcing flow. And it too, as it is fed, it grows and grows and grows, and it is truly limitless and truly magnificent. I wonder sometimes, the Ascended Masters wonder, those who decry perfection, what they would say when it comes to the perfection of various organs within their physical body. Would they like a perfect or an imperfect kidney, liver, lungs, blood vessels, whatever it might be? When those things are out picturing the patterns of imperfection as the return of karma, you all know what are the sufferings that follow in their wake. So this quality of seeing perfection is not, and I don't know how far across the world this pattern exists, but in the United States, there is the tradition that if an ostrich is afraid of something, it believes that if it puts its head into a hole in the ground, that the fear will go, that the menace will go away and no longer be present. That is not what is meant when Saint Germain says to close your eyes and see perfection. In fact, what he is referring to is take the light of your crystal cord, harness and form an alliance with the mind of God, which is pristine and absolute perfection. Enter into the at-one-ment with that streaming of the divine mind. Let that greater mind stream through your mind and let it flow forth out into the world and radiate perfection into life. Of this you can be assured. Your beloved Mighty I Am presence is the acme of perfection, the epitome, the pinnacle of God perfection. In its luminous, sun-like radiance of the electronic body, it is a white fire body that is eternally pouring forth solar fires of divine perfection. That is the law of the being of the Mighty I Am presence. Never in all eternity will it ever lower its attention to even momentarily register anything imperfect. And if you wish to re-enter the world of your presence, or even of your Christ presence, you will have to embrace the law of that being of the presence. Learn to live by those principles. Learn to revel in them. And realize that from the electronic body through your own causal body in Christ's presence, and then stepped down by the four lower bodies, your Mighty I Am presence is able to be a veritable radiating sun that, like the sun of Helios and Vesta, is forever venting a solar wind that is charging space, hallowing space, and producing perfection everywhere. Flowing forth that steady stream of God perfection out into life. This is the law, and there is none other. Those who are ascended today are in those realms of perfection because when, like you, they were here in embodiment, they learned these very principles. And it is only because they embraced them and practiced them that they are now free today. One of the ways that Saint Germain put it was when he said that he saw the unreality and impotence of outer appearances in contrast to the immutable, changeless perfection of the realms of the Godhead. And he learned to give that decree in the name of the unfed flame, in the name of the Mighty I Am presence, you have no power. And he stated that, and now for me today as an ascended being, my every moment is the realization of that those things for me have no power. And his injunction was, it is for every individual student. Each one must apply that law for themselves and practice it meticulously in all of the great and seemingly insignificant moments of their lives, secret times in their lives. The most pregnant statement that he made on this subject after he had given that injunction was that statement, "Let not the opportunity pass, as so many have," referring to the many students who have come into the Ascended Master activities flush with the passion and enthusiasm for the perfection of the presence, but have let it wash over them, but have not meticulously practiced that discipline. And in time, because they have been ignorant or for whatever reason unwilling to adhere to those standards, the time comes when they lose the magnet of that zeal for that path and let it pass from them. Now, in this conference and Acropolis, one of the goals set by the Brotherhood is that all of you should come to the realization of how you are able to come under the canopy, the overarching canopy, like the broad branches of a mighty oak tree. Come under that canopy of the Brotherhood and of the Elohim, and flow with the action of this 12-fold joint service to life that is being rendered by the Elohim, including this action of themselves being the instruments of the heart and mind of the great I Am for the coming to be of this system of worlds and the coming to be of your own victory. You might recall that beloved Master El Moria was embodied as Abraham, the father of many nations. And at an early time in his career, God appeared to Abraham and gave him this affirmation: I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. That was God appearing as the Lord of Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. And it was in that same consciousness that the Elohim are speaking to thee, to all of you today, and to all who will hear and embrace their help. They are our shield. In so many ways, able to reinforce our own efforts. Chief amongst them, every student, every one of your ability to pull off this seemingly insurmountable job of knowing and beholding perfection where you only see the outer appearance, and where it finds some anchor point within your own four lower bodies that seems to consciously or subconsciously resonate with that imperfection. As you come under this shield of Elohim, under its protection, and also, by the way, not only would you understand it as a shield that goes before you to protect you and to be a cosmic reflector away from you of anything unreal, but it is also standing guard at all of and reinforcing the electronic circle produced in answer to your call by your own Mighty I Am presence. So you can understand it not only as a shield that might symbolically be vertically oriented, but also a shield that is horizontally superimposed over the electronic circle with the anchor point of the luminous presence of the 12 Mighty Elohim and their divine complement at those cardinal points in your own electronic circle, radiating perfection, that perfection of the presence, sending it forth into manifestation. As you cultivate this quality of pristine, unsullied divine purity and perfection, a number of things will happen. Of course, you will have that restoration of a greater flow of the crystal cord with which to wield the power of the presence. But in addition to that, steadily there will be the stepping up of your four lower bodies. And this we will get into when we talk about the sixth ray and the seventh ray. the resurrection flame of the sixth ray of the Elohim of peace and aloha, and the seventh ray of Arcturus and Victoria. Even students of the light have no conception of how slowed down, run down, decelerated the physical bodies and the four lower bodies have become in comparison to the similar vehicles of an unascended initiate or an adept. And that deceleration has basically put the four lower bodies on their own outside of this overshadowing of the Christ presence and the Mighty I Am presence. And there needs to be that re-acceleration of the vehicles. Tremendously. By the way, it is a lifelong work. I'll just cite one example of this when we'll return to this in earnest when we come to the sixth and seventh rays. You all know of the many lifetimes of attainment of the beloved Godfrey prior to his final embodiment. But he himself must have stated numberless times, and the Master said it if he did not, that before he could serve in that capacity, in that office, there had been 30 years of constant acceleration within his world. 30 plus years in that embodiment. Each of you is to step down the charge of your own beloved Mighty I Am presence. You too need a lifetime or lifetimes, hopefully not lifetimes, hopefully just this lifetime, but you need every bit of this lifetime for the re-acceleration of the four lower bodies. A lot of the times when you think to yourself, well, I did my decrees, but the answer didn't come, or it's too slow in coming, or whatever the case might be, it's because there is this out of sync deceleration of these vehicles. They're not suitable instruments for stepping through the limitless power of the presence quite yet. And that's what you're working on your path, is the raising of those vehicles back up into perfection. As that raising happens more and more, it means that the gears, like in the transmission, the gears between your Christ presence and your outer memory and mind will finally be able to work in tandem. They will be much more at one with each other. And without ever traveling from point A to point B in space, you will rise in consciousness. And as you rise in consciousness, waking up within the vehicle of your Christ mind, your so-called higher mental body, or within the vehicle of your nirvanic vehicle of your causal body, or best of all, in the vehicle of the electronic body. As you function in those vehicles, one of the first realizations that is going to come upon you is that you are going to realize that you are re-entering realms that are more real than this outer world. They are more permanent and more real. And the most important thing for your purposes today is you will realize that they already exist. These realms that you are entering are not blinking into existence as you come into them, but they have always been, especially when you reach the realms of the great central sun, you are going to realize that these realms have always been there in that way. And that, lo and behold, they are realms of divine perfection. They are realms that are the product of the beauty, of the workings, of the imagination and conceiving of the divine mind. They are tangible. They are real. And they are powerful and potent beyond all measure. And they form, along with what Hercules spoke of as the will of the presence, they form the underpinnings. They form the very foundation on which this outer world is built. And the only thing that human beings can do is scratch a little bit on the surface of those foundations, try to distort them, try to impose them. But it doesn't take long for nature to shrug off those impositions of mortal imagination. And so when you are invited or endured by the ascended masters to see perfection everywhere, you're not being invited to pretend something. You're not being invited to be a Pollyanna and just live in a world of pink elephants. You are being instructed wisely in where to pay attention with your mind and where to give power of acceptance with your feelings, and to rivet your consciousness on those realms of perfection, and to know that they are always there behind the scene of manifestation. When we have the time, one of the examples that Saint Germain has given in this regard is to consider such realms of perfection to be a dancing ocean of points of light that are everywhere alive and sparkling and so brilliant as to dazzle your vision, to challenge your ability to keep your eyes open because the light is so intense. What you end up with is almost like a milk bath of liquid light, sparkling and dancing with the pristine original perfection of life. And what you are invited to do is to visualize whatever might be the personal or worldwide malady that appears to be so threatening, to see that submerge, to go down into this realm of the dazzling white light of God perfection. And what happens as it goes out of your sight is that the makeup of that imperfection is disassociated. Sometimes it's by the violet flame, sometimes the resurrection flame, many times by the white fire core. The constituent composite nature of that discord is deconstructed into its original pristine components of perfection. And that imperfection is sloughed off, and then the mind of God is invited to furnish the divine counterpart that was always behind the scene, to put that back in its place, and to let that whatever that imperfect pattern was re-emerge, come forth out of its milk bath and express the divine perfection that is there, and bring that forth into manifestation. This is a principle, this is a practice that every disciple on the path ultimately must achieve. And the sequence is that you first master this discipline, and only then, little by little, your ascended master sponsors and your Christ presence give you a little bit more power. It can be power in the form of crystal cord energy. It might even be power at your job, where you are put in charge of other people. Once you have that power, is it going to go to your head? Are you going to become dictatorial? Are you going to distort and misuse that power? Or are you going to guide it with wisdom and cover it with love, so that as it goes forth, it only produces perfection? As you learn this principle, you will find that more and more the Mighty I Am Presence and the Ascended Masters will fly to your side and reinforce your aspirations towards your ascension and towards outpicturing perfection in every part of your life. Moria said quite explicitly many years ago, when we were trying to thank him for his intercession with us, there were only 4 words: we always stand ready. And the we in that case were all of the Ascended Masters, the Elohim included. And that is absolutely true. The Elohim always stand ready to reinforce your momentums. You have to invite them. You have to choose to live in their reality and their world. And you have to go with the pressure of their consciousness. In all cases, regardless of what divine qualities they might be emphasizing on their service to life, in all cases, they are all going to look to the patterns of perfection in the mind of the presence, and take those patterns as the paradigm that they wish to use as a model to bring forth out here into this world of form. Although I haven't touched upon this, one of the other added blessings that comes as your 4 lower bodies are re-accelerated, resurrected, balanced, and you rise into these realms, you will be astonished to realize that all the while you did without so much out here in this outer world of form, and had the so-called poverty consciousness about so many things, that all the while there within the mind, the heart and mind of the presence, all the while there were already in final, finished, perfected form every possible permutation, every possible variation or variety of perfection of anything had already been prepared and was already in its finished form, ready to come forth at your use. Plato famously taught about these ideas in the divine mind. To this day, they are referred to as the platonic forms. Health is a form, abundance, purity, beauty, harmony. Everything that comes under the heading of perfection is a facet in the mind of God, the universal mind of God, that holds to these patterns of perfection. Within a single 6 or 7 page section of one of the works, the word perfection or perfect or perfected, one of those variations, is used probably about 40 times. Over the course of one volume, there are probably close to 400 examples of that use of that term, of perfection. One of the greatest challenges which the Ascended Masters face, and we ourselves face, is to sing the praises of God perfection and extol its virtues and plant the seeds of God desire in the consciousness of the children of the light, of the sons and daughters of God, so that they too might find that pursuing God and pursuing that transcendent perfection which God is more to be desired than all of the distractions and all of the many things that the vast majority of mankind elect to pursue in their recreation, in their careers, and so forth. Whether they do or not embrace it makes no difference as far as what the Brotherhood is going to do. It makes no difference to the presence of God. And if you are aspiring to your ascension, you will not permit it to lure you away from the zeal of pursuing that path of divine perfection for yourself. This, of course, is where the service of the Elohim, especially the Elohim of the second ray, beloved Apollo, comes to the fore. For it is his office and that of his twin flame Lumina to supplement and augment not only the yellow of divine illumination, but even more importantly, the golden plume of the threefold flame, which is where you find wisdom's ray, the wisdom of the mind of God that is the very substance with which God thinks, whether it is the universal presence of the great I Am or your own individual presence. Your Mighty I Am presence thinks with that golden plume and is forever seeking to expand that plume within your heart flame and cauterize all of the lesser records of imperfect patterns that mankind have embraced and imposed upon themselves as a crown of thorns, pressing those thoughts of unreality onto their own crown chakra. May you never tire of perfection. May you never feel as if you're getting spiritual indigestion because you're having too much of this same quality. In fact, just as is true of every quality, perfection is inclusive of all of the other facets of the divine nature. I'd like to share with you this one hymn of praise composed by beloved Saint Germain on the theme of divine perfection as it is extolled within your own Christ presence, as it is poured forth by your own Mighty I Am presence, so that you might realize this is what the Elohim are offering you, is the opportunity to re-enter these realms of God perfection, and for you, while you are still here, to have the pressure of the divine thought of Arcturus, of Apollo, of Cyclopeia, his concentrated attention, to have the pressure of that flowing forth and rolling back everything less than perfection in your world. Here is how beloved Saint Germain put it in one place. If mankind choose to experiment with one spoke instead of the entire wheel of life, there is nothing to say them nay. And their wheel of manifestation will never be complete until they finally recognize their own Mighty I Am presence, for that is the only source which knows all that is required to build any pattern of outer manifestation, a pattern that will produce divine perfection for them. All such patterns of perfection are forever stored within the all-knowing, fathomless, and dazzling mind of the Mighty I Am presence. All-knowing means knowing all perfection. Fathomless is a very interesting choice of terms. It's a nautical term. When you take the fathoms in seafaring times of ages past, before there was sonar and so forth, they would have knots tied and they would drop them down to make sure that the keel of the boats did not run aground. So they would be separated off. So taking the fathom was measuring how far it was to the bottom of the ocean bed. So when it is fathomless, it means that you will never reach a bottom. It is limitless, it is fathomless, it defies mortal quantification of any sort whatsoever. It is that depthless mind that the human mind cannot encompass or measure. Stored within the all-knowing, fathomless, dazzling mind of the Mighty I Am presence. And these patterns can never be manifest out in the physical world until the outer mind has become bathed in the golden plume of the threefold flame, which is produced only by the individualization of God, the Mighty I Am presence, through the electronic body. In transcending all earthly laws, and by that, we wouldn't say he's necessarily talking about the laws of a given nation, but he's talking about laws of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, aging and so forth, in transcending all such earthly conditions, we are only claiming our God-given authority to live and to act in perfect accord with the Mighty I Am presence, with God. And what is that presence? It is eternal and changeless perfection that is forever expanding itself and giving of itself and pouring it forth to every part of life. That is the law of the being of the Mighty I Am presence. It is perfection and perfection only. You might recall that the distinction is made between what goes on at the level of the electronic body, where there is not even the merest taking of recognition or awareness or focusing on anything imperfect. Not time today to go into the whys and wherefores of that, but suffice it to say that that is absolutely true. The Mighty I Am presence, living in its own realm, has never heard a report of imperfection, nor will it ever. That role is adjudicated by the Christ presence. And here you'll notice that although the Christ wields the two-edged sword of Christ's discrimination, knowing reality from illusion, there's also that the proviso that none of what the Christ mind registers that is less than perfection ever enters the world of the Christ presence. It never reverberates within that world. And that is why you can't feed your life into imperfection, give it any power, or enter into any kind of Cold War suppression of hostilities, of coexistence with imperfection in yourself. If you want to have the perfection of that presence, if you want to have the ideal overshadowing as depicted in the portrait of the presence, of where your Christ presence is superimposed over your four lower bodies, you will embrace that law for yourself and not permit your emotions or your mind to be distorted or provoked into re-registering imperfection. If they do, then is when your Christ presence must rise out of that overshadowing and at one-ment and be tethered merely by the crystal cord energy. So that is the law of your Christ presence, does not allow any of that into its world. And that is the very discipline that is being espoused to you here, which you can now see you can achieve because you have all 12 mighty Elohim and their divine complements at work to assist you in that process. One of the best decrees in our whole decree arsenal is the one decree. It is an affirmation of the power of the presence as the one, everywhere present. And as you give that decree, which we will, before the week is out, we'll give it together. As you give that decree, you are affirming that the one is present everywhere, at every point in space, at the white fire core of every part of life. The one is there. It is there as the singularity of the one, and it is there as the omnipresence, omnipotence of the great central sun. It is there as the underpinnings of all other realms of manifestation. And it is forever immutably changeless perfection, forever expanding itself. It is that dazzling white fire of the presence, alive, intelligent, containing within it the pristine purity of every God quality. And through your calls, you can invite the Elohim and your archangels and ascended masters in your own presence to charge every part of space with that perfection. If you have ever felt as if your own mind was too weak to withstand the onslaught of the reports of imperfection, or if you've ever felt as if your own mind couldn't reach out very far, maybe only as far as your hands could reach or as far as your eye could see, understand that from the standpoint of the cyclopean nature of these 12 Elohim and their divine complements of Helios and Vesta, of Krishna and Sophia, all of whom are engaged in this action, they are able to hold the entire mental and emotional and physical planes of this planetary body all in their mind's eye at a single glance without any strain or effort. And they are doing on a macrocosmic level for the whole earth this impetus of golden helicon, seeing perfection wherever there are reports of imperfection. There is no cave of the Minotaur. There is no place, there is no rock under which there lies some insect, no lair of any dragon. There is no place for unreality to scurry away and hide from this all-knowing, all-seeing constancy of the pressure of this light on a worldwide scale. That is the volume of power focused by the Brotherhood that is required but for the golden age to come forth into manifestation. And they need you as a living pillar of fire, to be a living electrode, to anchor all of this impetus where it is needed most, out here in this outer world of form. Beloved Lord Krishna and Sophia, beloved Helios and Vesta, beloved Apollo and Lumina, beloved Archangel Jophiel and Christine, beloved Lord Lanto and all who serve the ray of wisdom and divine illumination, let the mighty resurgam Christos of the luminous filaments of the mind of God and the mind of Christ burn through all of the dross and effluvia of odic misqualification, all of the records in the memory vehicle, all of the overlays of human thought and feeling. Let all of that be swallowed up, and in its place let there arise the phoenix of the resurrected and ascended Godhead charioteer and Godhead charioteers as those who are this vanguard for the dawning golden age. We thank you and we accept it done. Amen.